mundo está bem agora? Eu acho que a gente está ao vivo. Claro, eu posso falar um pouquinho de português, mas eu prefiro falar inglês. A gente vai falar sobre CACD, sobre a Edital, que saiu agora, as mudanças, mas tudo em inglês, okay? So I'll say hi, everyone. Okay, I hope everyone's okay. Those who've studied with me before or studying with me now, a special hug and kiss. And we're going to talk about the Edital. Now, probably you've seen a lot of people talking about it, right? The main changes, well, in the first phase, there's not a lot of changes. So remember, we've got those two phases. The first phase, the TPS, and the second phase, of course, the composition and the summary. No translation this year. And we thought we'd have a summary last year. And every year there's been a summary, but they didn't have it last year. They cut it down to translation. And I think that changes quite a lot, the second phase. But so before we go in, I suppose some of you online don't know who I am, okay? Hi, Vanessa. Hi, Marina. Those ones saying hello, say hello if you want. Yara, good. So who am I? Well, I'm, as people call me, Professor Sean. Okay, Teacher Sean, teacher or Shaun, anything, my name, because it's always difficult here in Brazil. I am, let's say, a very experienced, tô de careca, really, with regard English in Brazil. I taught the people for concursos, for CACD specifically for, I don't know how many years. Okay, so when we had the old CESP, which was a good thing that we know what happened then, because Sebraspi is now, I went through all of that, hi Leticia. So, of course, I'm a specialist teacher. I specialize in certain areas of English. I teach at the, here in Brasilia, so I teach at the government. I teach high-level civil servants in the government, some very high-level civil servants, and have contracts with federal and state agencies or governments as well, government departments. I specialize in legal English, business English, of course, but mainly legal English at the moment, and concursos. So, of course, some people might know me as a teacher of Rio Branco. I don't teach anymore, too busy helping the government, all different departments, communicate in English with other countries. Okay, so for example, working with the TCU, who is at the UN at the moment. Hi, João. So that's what I do. All right, so and I have a team of teachers work with me as well. But here at Clipping, I think been at Clipping for how many years? About, well, before the COVID. All right, so that COVID changed everything, didn't it? And that's probably why we're more accustomed, more used to working online. And I like it too. I consider my office here. I'm not at home. I do have an office with my Liverpool banner and talk to you all. Okay, so that's me. All right, I've been here for over 30 years. Claro, eu falo português. Você pode, Clara, perguntar qualquer coisa em português também. But we're going to speak in English. All right, so I've been here a long time and really know all about Brazil and sometimes advise people about Brazil too. But anyway, so let's talk about, well, maybe it's your first time this year you're going to do the TPS, okay? So you're going to do it for experience. Of course, you could pass. Depends. If you've been studying, let's say, international relations or law and focus on this a long time already while you were at university, okay, then you might have a chance. I remember one of my students passed first time, but it's very rare, okay? So it should be, of course, the experience you're going to get. You feel the pressure, understand how long it takes to do the test, try and see your timing as well. But all of that we do on the courses as well. we give the timing that we expect, of course, you to take in each section. Well, I certainly do anyway. All right, so this experience is very good. If you pass the TPS and go to the second phase, if it's your first time, it's going to be very difficult because you need to be prepared for the second phase. If it's say the second year you're doing it, you should be improving. Hopefully you're going to pass and get to the second phase. But again, sometimes many students don't really have that preparation, a complete preparation. They pass, of course, and depends how much you've been studying, okay? And they don't really pass until that third time, okay? Because what happens is we focus on the TPS, and we forget sometimes the second and third phase, all right? And English, in a way, requires a lot of study, a lot of pressure. And of course, it's a different language. Of course, you've got Spanish or French as well. You've got those options, but English is something you have to score high with. You have to get, with English, 480 points to be able to go through to the next phases, okay? So it's really quite, you need a high score, of course, with the second phase, as well as passing the first phase. I think we're off there, we're back now. So many of you will have a different focus on what you're doing for this, or some of you are trying it for the first time, some of you in the second time are a bit more confident. The third time, maybe this is the time you should be thinking of passing the TPS, okay, and going to that second phase. So when it comes to the second phase, you're going to have to be prepared. Of course, you have to be prepared for everything. But we're going to be doing, of course, a TPS course and second phase course as well. So you have a complete intensive preparation. Now let's talk about the TPS first. Now, if you've done it with me, then come and do it again. There'll all be new tests. We'll be doing tests, simulados every week. And the good thing, in a way, what's different than all of the previous years, is that we can use AI. We can use ChatGPT or all of the others in a way, as we've been doing. I've been doing for the last year, putting all the exams, studying the exams, researching the exams, and being more precise on the type of questions that come in the TPS, okay? Something that I've found is really good. Hi, Gabriella with 2 L's. Good to see you. Okay, so what we've managed to do is, what I've managed to do is focus a lot more on the TPS, because what the courses say, well, there are 2 types of questions, the reading comprehension question and the vocabulary questions, okay? And there's some grammar as well, okay? But inside the reading comprehension, there are very different styles. We'd have about 4 different styles. Now, within that, we can go even further and analyze those different styles of those individual styles. So we'll go again, again, again. We can have lots and lots of practice of every type of permutation of questions that they can give you. Okay, they seem very similar, but sometimes there's a slight difference. And of course, we've got, 8 weeks of that TPS. We're going to be able to cover them all, understand them all. So when you walk into the TPS, well, the English section, you're going to say, well, I've done this before. I feel good, okay? And I know how to answer them. And that's the best way, okay? We've got to have good English, of course. But also now it's not studying English, it's studying exams and preparing for those exams. That's the focus now. All right, so knowing what those questions are, not being surprised by anything, and learning how to guess well. All right, so, and that's all part of the practice. Okay, so the TPS will be focusing on, we're doing, of course, lots of vocabulary questions, because we have the reading comprehension questions and the vocabulary questions, which can be quite difficult. So we need to prepare how to answer them, whether to answer them or not. Now, some teachers of other courses might say, yeah, guess them. You're only going to lose a small, it's more likely if you get it right, you'll gain points than lose one, okay? Because you're penalized less But we don't want to be penalized if there's something you just don't know. And that's the problem in English. There's one you probably have no idea because it's a very high level, then you're not going to answer it. And we need to practice that because everyone is in doubt. Everyone is unclear. They think, wow, should I guess or not? So be more confident in your chutando, in your guessing, is also a skill we have to do, right? Because we don't want to be penalized, okay? Get penalized 4 or 5 questions because you guessed them wrong, you're out, right? So all this care, all this strategy we must look at, okay? And that during we're going to be doing 2 classes a week with TPS. We're going to start with easily these reference questions, which should be the easiest ones. I'm going to do all the types and styles of reference questions, work on the other interference and all types of questions. All these you'll find out, and then move on to the vocabulary ones. Because vocabulary is the majority, about 50% or more, sometimes 60% are usually vocabulary, okay? And we have to understand them. That's for the TPS, all right? So questions every week, styles of questions learned, different types of questions, of course, lots of different texts. All right, some I'll be taking from books and some I'll be changing from and making them either easy or difficult with help of ChatGPT. So I can manipulate it to give you the types of questions that will come on exactly on the TPS. That's the beauty of having this at the moment. I would make the examiner very worried, all right? Like we have the key to knowing their mind. Okay, Felipe, hi. And so that's good. That's what I'm going to enjoy. I've always enjoyed doing the TPS courses, okay? And it's quite tough. I know you're going to have lots and lots of intensive courses at the moment, not just with me, with others as well. And this acompanhamento, that's terrible to say, isn't it, my Portuguese? But this help you're going to get, an orientation during this time, is extremely important, all right? Because this is when the pressure comes. Now, there's the TPS. Twice a week, we'll have, I think, Mondays and Thursdays, and about this time, we'll be there, okay? And of course, everything's recorded so you can see, and you have exercises every class as well. So you'll be going crazy with information, okay? Remember, you're not going to wash. You're not going to change your clothes. You're just going to focus on getting to the day of the exam. Now, second phase. Now, this depends on where you are in your studies, okay? Maybe if you're in the first year and you're still learning, you're not going to be ready to pass. So even if you pass, you're going to, let's say the Portuguese expression, you're going to die on the beach, okay? All right, you're going to find it very difficult to do it, but the experience is necessary, okay? The English, of course, is 3 hours and 30 minutes this time with a composition and a summary. Before it was a composition and a translation. Now, when we look at exams, we look at cognitively, how dense, how heavy it is, okay? So what's good really about the composition and the summary, they use the same cognitive uses, let's say, of your brain, okay? Yeah, I will do, Hooch, okay? I will talk about that, okay? Give me a chance to finish this, but I'll talk about the second, because I'm talking about the second phase now, okay? All right, so, but it's a good question, okay? Thank you. All right, so with the second phase, we're going to have that composition summary, okay? And that means it's very, very similar, the process, because when you do composition translation, translation is a different process, it's heavier, although sometimes it can be quicker. With the summary, you're going to need an hour for the summary. So with 3.5 hours, you're going to need to know how to write composition in 2.5 hours, and then the summary in 1 hour. It takes that time. I need to practice, especially the summary as well. If you can do it with, you're not going to get more than an hour for it. Some people take 1 hour and 20 minutes because they're not prepared, and then it doesn't give you time for the composition. of course, the composition is 70 points. So the first thing you want to do on the exam is always do the composition, leave what's left, the time left, hopefully 1 hour for the summary. So that means during our course, we'll be looking at this strategy. We're forcing you how to write composition 2.5 hours, then how to write the summary in an hour. As I said, they're cognitively very similar, so they have similar systems. So it's a similar strategy. Of course, in the resumo, in the summary, you don't have to plan anything. You just have to find the information. But of course, with the question, you need a lot of thought, a lot of consideration. The planning stage is the key to passing this exam and going into the to Rio Branco. All right. So that planning stage and that how you've developed your, let's say, your law, your political, international politics, okay, history, where you are, how mature you are, will depend how you analyze this question. You can analyze the question very well, no problem, but substance is very important this year, because with the composition, there are 70 points, so 45 points is this substance, the organization, the cohesion, the arguments, and the analysis, okay, the reflection on the question, okay? And then, of course, another 25 points for mistakes. Now, luckily, my candidates all got perfect scores last year, all right? 70 out of 70 of the composition, great. So we know how to organize it. Actually, the organization of these hasn't changed since Iagi's and the old CESP. It's always followed the same way. And that's great because, of course, those students who got perfect score of 70 followed the same way as they did when they were in Iagi's and still scored excellent. And they're actually in the Rio Branco as well, which I'm very happy. Okay. So Vanessa, I'm going to talk about the summary as well. But we have to look at getting the maximum points, between 65 and 70 for the composition. So practice and practice. Practice under pressure. So sitting at home with your cell phone and timing yourself and learning how long it's going to take you to plan, how long it's going to take you to do a draft. It's very important, a draft, because if you make corrections, they don't like it. They sometimes want to penalize you. I had one student got a perfect score and they decided to penalize him twice, okay? Because it just didn't see that his handwriting was perfect. Of course, we got it back in the recursos. We did that, but they tried it. Sacanagem, okay? The sacanagem examiners tried that, all right? Also, the good thing when I think about the recursos, as we've got summaries and compositions, there's a lot less subjectivity in the correction, all right? Because with the translation, you can choose a word, the examiner will choose another word, or you may use a structure, the examiner might use another one, and you have to fight it out to try and see if they will accept it, okay? And you don't have that necessarily with the composition summary. It's just your information, and if it's right, then the examiner can't complain, all right? So we have to look also at these little things within a composition summary, like, when you make a little mistake. And by avoiding that, you need to do a draft, then a final copy. And can you do this? Of course. When I used to teach the old CESP, used to have students, only used to teach composition summary. I never bothered with the translation. I thought it was a waste of time, actually, because you're going to get what you're going to get. And people want to put techniques and ideas into translation, but you've just got to do what you know. So we're always focused on composition summary and doing that within 3 hours or 3.5 hours. We've got that time. So, it's possible. All right. Now, Vanessa asked about the summary. We'll have to anyway talk about HUJ, the second phase, because that's the main one we should be focused on. TPS is the TPS. It's going to happen. It's going to be these questions, going to go through all these styles of questions. But the second phase is heavy. So when we come to, after we've looked at the composition, we need to practice a summary. So summary, as I said, 1 hour, and you need to practice that. Now, there are 3 parts, in a way, the strategies of the summary. The first one is to get your magic pen. We always joke on the course, get your magic pen, the pen that knows all the answers that you've been using, all right? And that will find you the main content in the text, all right? So you're underlining the text. Now, some people underline it and then they write on the piece of paper, at the side of the piece of paper, don't have one with me now, another version. I prefer my students to get a draft piece of paper and start writing these pieces of information they've underlined on a separate piece of paper, okay, or rascunha. So what the trick is, let's say the trick with Sebraspi, I keep want to say Sespi, Sebraspi, it's different than, of course, Iagis. You could still use the old the text from Iagis, okay, but with the question, of course, is different. We've got between 15 and 30 lines. Now, the old CESP used to ask for 200 words, which came to about 20 lines, all right? So we expect it's very similar. They give them 15 to 30. Why? Because in a way, this is the first time they've done it, all right? So I expect next year's to be more, to be a bit stricter with the number of words or lines, okay? But I think as this first year, I think they're allowing this leeway between 15 and 30 lines, okay? So we look, so what the old Sebraspi, and here's a trick, the old Sebraspi, which was CESP, they used to have 8 different pieces of content, all right? Because the examiner in a few times, I think it was 216, 270, might write down on the piece of paper the answers if the content was given, and tick if the 8 was given. And that would be, say, now the 15 points of content that's expected, because Sebraspi, of course, has given 30 points for the summary. So this content would be 15 points, and the other 15 points will be, of course, not making mistakes. So we're going to underline, let's say, between 6, 8, maybe pieces of information, all right? And they're going to be about 2 sentences each for you to explain and link them together and make 2 or 3 paragraphs, linking them together clearly with however, also, furthermore. It's all you need to do. So it's just like doing a composition, okay? It looks like a composition, all right? Because if you've got, say, you've got going to use 20 lines, and you're going to have 2 compositions. If you're going to go 30 lines, it's 2, sorry, compositions, 2 paragraphs, okay? 2, because you've got about 10 lines each paragraph in the composition, all right? If you've got 30 lines, you're going to use all 30, which I don't think you're going to need. You're going to need 3 paragraphs, because you're going to look about 9, 10, maybe 11 lines each, because you're going to get that piece of information. Maybe there's 8 pieces of information, 4 would go into, nicely linked into 1 paragraph, and 4 of those information will go into the second one. It's quite a logical thing, and you have to practice that, okay? When you know it, it's easy. People do the summaries, no problem, but you've got to practice it, of course. And then you know, you get your magic pen, you read it, you go, that's information important, that information. And what we're going to do is show you what is not the information you should be choosing, okay? Here is one example of not to choose. Anything is an example, okay? An example of something we're not going to use, all right? Because you just want factual, summarize information from the text. So if it talks about an example, that's extra information. So we have to learn how to eliminate, what not to choose, all right? And just choose that main point. And that's, of course, something we do as well. So the composition summary, okay, of course, you've got to practice them together. So what we're going to do, we'll practice the compositions first, make sure you're organizing well, and of course, we've got to do some correction as well. There's a course, of course, just, I think, just me giving you the instructions, and there's a course with correction too, and I'll be correcting them. So we'll be doing compositions and then summaries and then both together. All right, so then you practice doing them both together, because you take one step at a time. All right, as I said, it's cognitively, it's very cognitive loaded. So cognitively, as we say, your mind goes crazy with just the composition. And then you go crazy with just the summary. And then when you've dominated them, we put them together, and your mind goes crazy again until you are aware of what you're doing. So each step makes it easier. Each experience makes it clearer what you're doing. And that clarity when you're walking into the exam is fundamental. Okay? So Vanessa, the summary may seem difficult for you, but with practice, okay, you can do it within an hour. And it's a very logical, straightforward, there's no thing and you're not planning anything. You don't have to think. With the composition, you have to think. You have to analyze, consider, choose good content, okay, decide how you're going to organize it. But when you practice with the summary, you don't have to do that. The planning, you don't have to think about. The planning is the content you're underlining in the composition. And you just remove that, put it in 2 or 3 paragraphs, make it a bit smaller than the main text, and link it nicely together, and that's it. It's not very difficult at all, but it does need practice, of course, all right? And when you've done it all of these 2 or 3 times, then all right? So, yeah, the phase 2 does require a lot more thought, okay? But thank goodness we haven't got translation, okay? Because it means the HIT courses will be less. It's, when we're doing the HIT courses, because in a way the HIT courses is phase 2.1, all right? You have to be ready to argue that. I remember one of my students, Marianne, and she passed first time, wasn't ready. I wrote to her and said, where's your HIT courses? Send me your failures. I need to see them, all right? And she didn't realize. Luckily, we managed to get a few points back, and she passed. And she was at Rio Blanco in my class there many years ago. So you have to be ready for that as well. And with composition summary, it's quite easy. The grammar and vocabulary are quite standard. Don't overthink it. You're not Shakespeare. You don't have to write wonderful. This is not Machado. All right, we're not making it difficult to read. Okay, so we make it simple. The examiner is going to see things clearly, and then it gives you a good score. Okay, Hooch, what are you going to say? In your opinion, what are the mistakes that people make most during the second phase? Well, it's very easy. Of course, spelling and conjugation of the verbs, especially have or has. They make that. Just those 2. It's not big things, all right? Maybe the examiner, if he's a bit of a, let's say, not a nice person, may want you to choose the present perfect instead of the simple past sometimes. Work hard on that to make that choice. But usually they're the simplest ones. Why are they simple? Because your brain's working so hard. Your brain is thinking and under stress. So that's where we miss the simplest ones. All right. So sometimes, I don't know, let's think of sometimes the only one you make is say, you might put, well, you have to know your mistakes first anyway. Why do we do? Because we study them. You write, the teacher, like me, finds out all your mistakes. You put them in a list and you stick them on the wall and you see them every day and punish yourself. Why did I make that stupid mistake? Then you don't make the mistake on the day, right? But is the conjugation of the verbs sometimes the difference between have and has only, all right? Spelling as well. Also be careful not to go to the end of the line and cut the word and continue on the second line, because it's those little things risks using simple punctuation, not giving the examiner a chance to penalize you, okay? And that comes with that practice. Of course, having a teacher is very much more experienced of doing the concurso. Yeah, this is a concurso that requires you to be clear on what you're doing, okay? Organize it clearly and answer it well, okay, with good content. And if you studied well and you've discussed this with your groups, if you have a group, discussed it with your teachers, then those questions you'll be ready for. What type of questions I think are going to come? Well, I'm still considering that, really. It's quite difficult whether, because the ideology of the last many years has changed, all right? So I would look at maybe the last 2 or 3 CESP one. There's a nice one that I've been doing about nationalism and patriotism, but changing it to nationalism and internationalism, maybe that comparison between them. Also, that's tend to be Sebastian, but the Agis ones are focused on diplomacy. What is a diplomat? What does a diplomat do? And Sebastian doesn't necessarily do that. Like last year, they talked about, of course, more climate change to do with conflict and water, okay, an issue, all right, of the world at the moment. One very important issue with Brazil, of course, as our amount of water we need to protect as well, and the vast amount of water we've got, in the air, our floating rivers. If you ever travel like I have all over Brazil, those massive, fantastic rivers, fresh water, full of life, okay, are fantastic. They don't have that so much in other countries. It's so unspoiled. That's hopeful that no one spoils them as we go. All right, so what we're going, let me go back to my notes so I don't, we did question 2. So if you want to look at old exams, yeah, for phase 2, maybe the questions of the old CESP, which is Sebastian, could help as well. Of course, all of the old exams, it doesn't matter, EAGs is fine. The summaries as well, I wouldn't go back too far. My records go back to 2009. Of exams, okay, they're quite different then, but IAGIS was very similar to Sebastian, to CESP, okay, didn't really change too much. So you can utilize those questions too. I'll be producing new questions, ones that are more up to date. I'm very much in touch with what's happening in the government. I follow the government, I teach the government, so aware of the possibilities of different types of questions that could come up, right? But as I said, policies and politics have changed. Ideologies are very strong in some areas. So we have to understand all of this complex discussion in order to think of just one question that can be the one to do it. Now, have I ever got the question that's been on the exam? Yes, once we did. We got the same quotation and type of questions about, I think it was about patriotism, wasn't it? And we had George Bernard Shaw's quote. I use the same quote. So usually if you're in the zone of teaching, then then you get it. All right, so they're very similar. But as long as you know how to organize your ideas the way the examiner wants, you'll score well, of course, with limited mistakes. All right. I think probably the examiner will be harder on mistakes this time. The first one, like Iages didn't really know what was doing the first one. And I think Sebastian, in a way, in the first one, also didn't have a great idea. So they start to get more difficult and examine things as they go, as they get more experience. Us who have got much more experience in a way sometimes than they have with the CACD, I know it sounds strange to say, are prepared for this. All right, as well. Good. Well, how long we've been? Wow, we're going to be going quite a long time, 35 minutes. I'm sure you want to get back to your lives. I hope that helps. How should you be studying? Well, TPS exams. Well, join our course, of course. All right, the first and second phase. Okay, let's see. Yes, the second. Well, she asks, does the second phase tend to lean towards British and American English? All right, then. So diplomacy, okay, is more, let's say, a British type of choice. All right. Now, on the exam, doesn't mean you're going to write British or American. You're going to be consistent in one. So if your spelling is this is never usually an issue. I think it's more an issue that people have, they're more worried about, because in Brazil we tend to say everything's either British or American, okay? But in diplomacy it tends to be just very formal, which tends to be more British, and because it's power, language is power, English is also part of the currency we use, okay, to persuade. So it tends to be a more elegant type of English, which we think, well, I think as well, that being British is more British. But if you're consistent with the spelling, like you use center with ER for American and labor without the U, and maintain that American spelling, there's no really way that the examiner, I've never seen them penalize you for it, okay, because you have a more American spelling, okay? The choice, sometimes, of course, Americans might choose a simple past where we would use the present perfect. That might be the only difference, but it tends not to really be an issue. I've never seen ever in all my years someone being penalized for writing all American or way, for example. But we have to get the spelling consistent. So if you're changing between spelling of American and British, then maybe they might penalize you, but I've never seen that. And I've never seen any person in a way write in a more American way, all right? Because you've had practice at this, okay? You practice with teachers who know how to pass, all right? So they expect that. So it's not really a big issue, Leticia. I wouldn't over worry about that, okay? Just write. It's the substance, it's your ideas that's much more important. If they're put on the paper well, all right, of course the examiner, if you get 70 out of 70, is going to try and find some problems, all right? But if you're going to get 70 out of 70, perfect score, it's not because you're, it's not really going to be a problem because of your American or British, okay? So don't over worry about that. It's never really a big issue. All right. As I said, I've never seen anyone penalized for that. Now, when I get to Rio Branco, for example, when you get young new diplomats in class, and of course, you know, I'm British, and they would say, "Wow, but I've got American English. Am I going to have a problem?" Well, we soon wash that out of you. Yes, don't wash that Americanism out of you. I'm joking, really. Of course, you're going to express what you want because you become a diplomat and you use diplomatic language, diplomatic expression, all right? And it sounds maybe like a very posh gringo, but this is the language you will have and be in a way conditioned to using because, as I said, the currency of diplomacy, of course, it's French, but it's also English, and persuading you need high-level English too, but that's spoken, all right, not the exam. So worry about that when you get there, all right? Talk to the teachers at Rio Branco, and they'll say exactly the same as me and as I always did when I was teaching there. Okay, fine. I don't think there's anything else, all right? Come and join me if you want, and the other teachers here at Clipping. We do know what we're doing, all right? Don't know about the costs and those sort of things. I'm just going to be going crazy for the next few months like everybody else. And there's, of course, a link here now, like everyone else, preparing everyone, doing the maximum to get our students through, okay, where you can follow me, I don't know, on Instagram if you want and ask questions. That's where I tend to deal with CACD. Okay, because I've got other courses with governments and lawyers, so they tend to communicate with me other ways. So follow me on Instagram as well. Ask me anything you want, any doubt. I love helping. You know, I have children the same age as you, believe it or not. All right, I know how difficult it is at your time of life to study hard, to work hard, get that job, and follow what you want in life. And I'm more sympathetic to your parents being a parent. Okay, so, and I love beating this examiner. That's the best thing, is when the students get in and they pass and you see them with their ties and their dresses, all happy with pictures with, of course, Atos Polcão behind it, Rio Branco. The biggest joy we can have is that, because you know their life's going to change, okay? And sometimes we have a little hand in doing that, all right? Good, fine, lovely to see you all, okay? I think everything's okay. Join me for the TPS on the second phase as well. It's going to be quite intensive, so if you're ready for that intensive way, we're here to help. And good. All right then, all the best to everyone. Lovely for you to join me. And if you didn't join me and you're watching this later, abrazos for you, to you as well, okay? And you can ask me on Instagram anything I didn't answer here. But in a way, go through this again. For example, second phase, Leticia, watch what I said again. Take notes, okay? That strategy is important, okay? Go through this again. It's always good to watch it again. I've given lots of information, probably so much in this 40 minutes is too much. Of course, on the course, we're much more. We're putting things into steps, clarity, so you can practice and build you up so you're ready, okay? If you don't join us, watch this again as well, okay? That's the best advice I can give you. Ciao, everyone. Ciao, beijo do gringo, whatever I should say at the end. And remember, don't do anything I wouldn't do, all right? Ciao, ciao.